Hello, welcome back to my studio. It's been a while since I've done one of my vlogs. It's been a really busy part of the end of the year. I ended up doing two more pop-up galleries, one for the whole month of December. So that's why I haven't been doing any videos in the last few weeks. I'll actually do a video a little ways down the way to tell you what I've been up to. But in the meantime, for today's video, I'm going to talk about the thoughts that go through my head when I start a big piece, a large-scale piece. So this is the piece that I'm working on right now, and we're going to go back to the beginning of where I just had this blocked in on canvas, and then we'll do a time lapse, and I will explain kind of what I'm thinking about at each stage and how I break down a big painting like this into tiny, manageable bites. So if that's something that interests you, stick around. I'm just about to start on a big 3-foot by 5-foot painting, and I'm going to be doing a time-lapse video of this, but I'm also going to be interspersing it each day with a little brief recap of what I did the day before and what I'm planning on doing that day. I really like when I do these big ones to do the time-lapse and do a video because first of all, with the time lapses, when I do the small ones, I tend to get in the way of the camera a lot. So with these big ones, it's a great teaching opportunity to be able to kind of explain what I'm doing and have it shown as I'm working on a big piece. So I'll show you this is the image that I am going to be painting. So this is a Killarney sunrise in Northern Ontario from a hiking trip I took earlier this year. So we're going to have the sun shining through, and we've got a distant kind of bay with an island and trees on the back side of it. Now, I always have to, when doing these big ones, you have to kind of formulate a strategy of how you're going to attack the painting. Sometimes with small ones, you can just dive in, but with these big ones, this is probably going to take me a week. So I need to break it down into reasonable bite-sized steps so that I can just focus on the one thing at a time. So I'm going to be painting this in water-soluble oils. If you have never used those and you're interested in trying them, I have a number of videos on my YouTube channel that you can go to where I go into great depth on how to use these. But I'm going to start on the very top part. So I'm going to be putting in the foliage up here at the top, and then I'm going to be painting the sky in the negative shapes between where the foliage and the branches occur. So that's the very first step that I'm going to do, and then I'll look at starting to resolving the bottom, but I probably won't get that top part finished today. That's a fair bit of painting to do and a fair bit of canvas to cover. Now I'll just talk briefly about what I've got going on here to start and how I start my painting. So I tone my canvas with fluid acrylic, and I use the quinacridone crimson. Everybody asks me why, so I'll just deal with that now. There's a couple reasons. Because I'm going to be creating a backlit effect of the sun shining through the trees, and because of the way that I paint the negative shapes between the branches and the foliage, little bits of that red will show through, and that creates a nice little red halo around the branches at the edge of the foliage, which actually mimics the effect of when a subject is backlit. And the other reason is that I use really bright, intense colors, and that bit of red poking throughout the canvas, throughout the painting, tends to unify the whole painting. Now this color only works, it works for me, also just because I've tried a number of different colors, and I just find that I like working on this fairly bright, intense red the most. If you're going to tone your own canvas, you need to kind of play around, try different things, see what works best for you. Now, so I've toned the canvas with fluid acrylic, and I've blocked in all of the tree shapes. Now you may not be able to see them in detail under here, but all the tree and branch shapes were blocked in black fluid acrylic first. And then I've gone over with dioxazine purple, and I've kind of masked in the silhouette of the skyline, the edge of the distant bay, the foreground marsh in front of the bay and blocked in kind of the values of the lights and darks in the foreground. And this probably has a lot more of the purple on it than I normally do, but I really want to accentuate the highlight of the light coming through and everything above the horizon. And I also like to, in any given painting, kind of look and see if there are going to be any specific challenges that are a little outside kind of my normal way that I paint. And this one, it's actually going to be, well, actually this entire foreground here, because there's not a lot of going on in this dark area down here in the front. So I'm gonna have to kind of paint fairly abstractly with large strokes of color to try and suggest that foreground clutter, but not have it, I don't want to get too persnickety in there in kind of rendering tiny leaves, but I also can't have it just a large, big, dull, dark. So that's probably going to present me with the most challenge, because I have to get that. It's one of those things I'm going to probably paint very quickly, but I've got to nail it to make it look good and suggestive of the foreground foliage, but not tightly rendered. Other than that, this stuff up here kind of falls into the typical way that I paint. So that's kind of my thought process when I'm going into a large painting like this. And what I'll do too, so just a brief kind of thing of the water-soluble oils. If you've ever tried them, I know a lot of people have trouble with them because we don't have turpentine to thin them out like we do with traditional oils. So it becomes very difficult to kind of put the paint on the canvas because you're painting in dry brush. What I found works well is to put a thin coating of the water-soluble linseed oil down on the canvas first, and while that stays wet, as you're painting into that, the paint slides on really nicely. Now, as I said, I'm likely not even going to finish this entire swath above the horizon today, so I'm only going to apply the oil down to about here, all the way across. And then when I finish this top part, then I'll apply the oil on the bottom for the next day, and that might either be tomorrow or the following day. So that's what I plan on doing. I'll set up the camera for the time lapse and get to work. Okay, so that's one full day of painting. That's about 5 hours of painting. That went by really quick. So I'm going to up the frequency of the photos in the time lapse, so we'll slow it down a little bit. But I'll just go over what I've done yesterday. Again, so painting all of the foliage here, and basically everywhere where you see the red of the canvas showing through once I'm done here, that will be the sky. And I'm going to be getting to that later today. The other thing that I did yesterday was painted the sun, and I kind of zoomed in on that so you could see that a little in a little more detail. The reason I like to put the sun in sometimes fairly early on in the painting is it really gives me an opportunity to judge my lightest. So this will be my lightest light, so it gives me the opportunity to judge the values for the rest of the painting. Obviously, some places where it's absolutely black, those are going to be the darkest areas, and then we have the pure white, so I can judge all the other values based on that. Now, one thing that if you try painting this way, you'll find it's very tricky painting on the red canvas, trying to gauge how dark or how light or how bright intense your colors are, because it looks very different on the canvas than it does on the palette because of the red around it. So that's something that just takes a long time. I've been painting on a red canvas now for probably 12 or 13 years, so I know how bright or intense or how dark or light I need to put the strokes of color on here. But if you're starting out trying on a different canvas, it will be kind of confusing at first because every color will look different depending on what color canvas it's put on. Now, speaking of that, I guess I should show you this too. When it comes to painting, I like to squeeze all my colors out first and then mix all the colors that I'm going to use. So here's my palette from yesterday.
And what I do at the start of the painting is looking at my reference material. I try to determine, first of all, which colors I need on my palette to be able to mix the colors I want. And then I try to mix all of those subtle variations on my palette and then just trust when I go to painting on the red canvas that the colors that I've actually mixed are correct. But once you've gone to all this trouble and you've mixed all your paints, you want them to last as long as possible. So I use a Masterson Stay Wet palette. I'll take this out of here when I go to paint. It's just palette paper mounted on a piece of that plastic cardboard type stuff that signs are made of. But by sealing this overnight, it allows the paints to stay workable for a much longer period of time. And I guess I'll just say one more thing about my palette. I'm sure a lot of you have heard that, oh, you should use a limited palette. And so I just want to talk about that. Using a limited palette makes the painting process a little easier and less confusing. But it's not necessarily the best way. So the basic concept here is whenever you mix two colors, if I mix a yellow and a red to achieve an orange, that will lose some of the intensity. So it won't be as bright as an orange that I squeeze out of the tube. So for me, I use a lot of very intense colors. Now that just makes it more complicated. It's like trying to arrange a song with a symphony orchestra as opposed to a three-piece band. But if you want to achieve the ultimate brilliance and pure saturation of all of your hues, so think about the outside of the color wheel, using more color will allow you to create brighter, more intense colors on your canvas. So enough said about that. I think I have a video on my YouTube channel about choosing your colors and mixing your colors. So that's kind of what I'm doing and what I'm using. Now what I'm going to be doing today is continue across this side of the painting. There's a small bit of foliage over here, but then I'm just going to be painting in the silhouette of the distant pine trees, which is across the bay. And then once I finish that, then I know that everything above the horizon line where I see the red of the canvas, that is going to be sky. And the way that I paint my skies typically is I create a number of pathways of color leading in towards the center of interest, which is the sun, that all help move the eye kind of in the background. So these will be subtle variations of blues, greens, violets, pinks, yellows, and oranges, with the basic concept that we are darker and cooler at the outsides of the painting, and as we move in towards the sun, those pathways of color become lighter and warmer, and that will help kind of create that overall feeling of the glow. But those pathways of color will just encourage movement throughout the piece, which is what we want the viewer's eye to do. So I am going to turn the camera on and we'll get back to painting.
so that's about 2.5 days of painting in oils. So I've painted all the foliage, painted all the sky colors, and now I'm going to move on to the next step. I'm actually going to end this video here just so that this doesn't become too long of a video. So this will be the end of part 1. And then I'll start filming the next part as I move on to the next stage. I just want to answer one question I'm sure I'm going to get, because I get it all the time from people, which is, wouldn't it be easier to paint the sky first and then paint the foliage? Well, the answer to that is maybe yes. But again, when we're painting, the last question you really want to think about is what would be the easiest way to cover the canvas in paint. What you want to think about is, what is the effect I want to create? What is the impact I want to create? And what's the best way to do that? And if you paint the background first and then paint the tree over top, it gives you a very different look. And that's a look that is more traditional, that most artists paint in that way, which also ties into another thing that I like to say, which is, if you paint like everyone else, your paintings will look like everyone else's. And that is not the goal. The ideal is to create great work with a unique voice. So I'll show you a couple close-ups. First of all, just so you can see the color that's in the sky, because I know sometimes in these time lapses it looks like it's just white. So I'll show you a close-up so you can see the color, and just show you a shot of over here so you can see that by painting the negative shapes, the sky last, it gives it a very unique look, and that's what I'm after. So I hope you found that helpful. I'm really excited to get back on this piece and finish it in my next vlog. That will be what we'll be doing from here to finish. So yeah, so Happy New Year. It's 2018 now. And I do hope to be getting back in a more regular routine of doing the vlogs. I'm going to be home at my studio more. So hopefully I'll be able to do a weekly vlog going forward. So if you find this stuff helpful, give me a thumbs up. Please share it with your friends. I welcome your comments and questions. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. I'm Tim Packer, and I thank you for your time.